Welcome to Catekids Reading Room.
This is episode number 6, which means for almost 6 weeks you've been stuck inside your house, forced to watch us do this. Well, we hope you still enjoy it. So we have 4 more things for you today. We're going to start with a story to hear. Lucy, can you hold up the book to the camera? What's the book called?
The Tale of Three Trees.
So we're going to read the story, The Tale of Three Trees. Then we're going to have a verse to memorize. We're going to memorize 1 Peter 2:24. And then we have a truth to learn. Noah, what truth are we going to learn?
New City Catechism, question 29. How can we be saved?
And then Anna, what song are you going to sing for us?
We're going to be singing Jerusalem.
All right, so that's our lineup for today. So let's start with our story. The Tale of Three Trees. Once upon a mountaintop, 3 little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars twinkling like diamonds above him. "I want to hold treasure," he said. "I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world." The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. "I want to be a strong sailing ship," he said. "I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship in the world." The third little tree looked down into the valley below, where busy men and busy women worked in a busy town. "I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all," she said. "I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world." Years passed. The rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. "Now I shall be made into a beautiful chest," thought the first tree. "I shall hold wonderful treasure." The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It is perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. "Now I shall sail mighty waters," thought the second tree. "I shall be a strong ship fit for kings." The third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven, but the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chests. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat. Too small and too weak to sail an ocean or even a river, he was taken to a little lake. Every day he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumber yard. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was to stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The 3 trees nearly forgot their dreams, but one night golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. "I wish I could make a cradle for him," her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. "This manger is beautiful," she said, and suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, "Peace!" The storm stopped as quickly as it had begun, and suddenly the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. The end. All right, now that we've heard our story, we're going to go to our verse to memorize. And today, we're going to work on memorizing 1 Peter 2:24. So you guys have to repeat after me, okay? He himself bore our sins.
He himself bore our sins.
In his body.
In his body.
On the tree.
On the tree.
That we might die to sin.
That we might die to sin.
And live to righteousness.
And live to righteousness.
By his wounds.
By his wounds.
You have been healed.
You have been healed.
So keep working on 1 Peter 2:24, and we have a song to go with it that will help you memorize it as well. So let's listen to the song together.
1 Peter 2:24. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. For by his wounds you have been healed. By his wounds you have been healed. By his wounds you have been healed.
All right, now that we worked on memorizing 1 Peter 2:24, we're going to work on our catechism question. So it's New City Catechism, question 29. And the question is, how can we be saved? All right, so I'm going to give the answers, and you guys repeat after me. Only by faith.
Only by faith.
In Jesus Christ.
In Jesus Christ.
And in.
And in.
His substitutionary.
His substitutionary.
Atoning.
Atoning.
Death on the cross.
Death on the cross.
So there's some very big words in there. So we're gonna quickly look at some of those very big words. So we said substitutionary. So what is a substitute? Can you think of an example of a substitute at all? Do you know of a substitute? Think of a substitute. Lucy, when have you seen a substitute before?
I don't know.
How about a substitute teacher? So if you're in class, your teacher's sick, you have a substitute teacher come in. Well, when we think about the cross and Jesus as a substitute, it's imagine going someone into a courtroom and they're guilty of something that they've done wrong. Maybe they hurt someone or something really serious. And then someone else comes in and says, you know what? I'm going to take your punishment for you. That's a substitute. Someone who substitutes themselves for someone else. And atoning, or atonement, is the idea of paying the penalty for our sins. So in the Old Testament, they would take an animal. And you remember what they did with the animals? What did they do with the animals in the Old Testament?
Kill them.
What did they do?
They killed him for
They
sacrifice.
killed them. Yes, they sacrificed the animals, and that was signifying that they were paying the penalty for their sin. So that's what those words mean. So let's work on memorizing it by singing the song together. So question 29, how can we be saved? right, now that we worked on our Truth to Learn from the New City Catechism, we are going to sing a song that's related to the book and the memory verse and the truth we've learned. And what song are we singing again, Anna?
Jerusalem.
All right, so Anna's actually going to sing this song for us. So when you hear the song after this, it's going to be Mrs. Smith is playing the music, and Anna is the one singing the song. So this isn't Pastor Andrew's voice. It's actually someone else's. I'm sorry, but it's just what you get.
See him in Jerusalem, walking where the crowds are. Once these streets had sung to him, now they cry for murder. Such a frail and lonely man, holding up the heavy cross. See him walking in Jerusalem, on the road to save us. See him there upon the hill, hear the scorn and laughter. Silent as a lamb he waits, praying to the Father. See the King who made the sun and the moon and shining stars. Let the soldiers hold him down, so that he could save them. See him there upon the cross, now no longer breathing. Dust that formed the watching crowds mix the blood of Jesus. Feel the earth is shaking now. See the veil is split in two, and he stood before the wrath of God, shielding sinners with his blood. See the empty tomb today, death could not contain him. Once the servant of the world, now in victory reigning. Lift your voices to the one who is seated on the throne. See him in the new Jerusalem. Praise the one who saved us. Lift your voices to the one who is seated on the throne. See him in the new Jerusalem. Praise the one who saved us. Praise the one who saved us. I hope you have enjoyed Catekids reading.
We hope you had a good time, that this has been a benefit to you, and we'll see you next time on the Catekids Reading Room. Bye for now.